content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families.
Before he became a headline, before he became a symbol, before his name was etched into history books and spoken in marches, he was just a boy, a 14-year-old boy. He liked jokes that made adults roll their eyes. He teased his cousins. He carried himself with the kind of confidence only a child who feels safe can have. His name was Emmett, but the people who loved him called him Bobo. In the summer of 1955, he packed a suitcase in Chicago and boarded a train headed south to Mississippi. He was supposed to be just a visit, a few weeks with family, cotton fields, late summer heat, stories to bring back home. His mother warned him before he left. She didn't warn him about the monsters. She warned him about the rules, invisible rules. This is not just a story about 1955. This is a story about hatred, about courage, about a mother who refused to close a casket, and about a country that had to confront what it had allowed to happen. This is the story of Emmett Till. And before we talk about what was done to him, we need to remember who he was. So with that being said, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries Mayhem. I'm Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader. It's just been the last couple weeks have been hectic. We've had live music, not this last weekend, but the weekend before with Katie Hart doing the dueling pianos. And this last weekend was Valentine's Day weekend. And we were packed to the gills here. We were having such a good time. Couples coming in doing painting portraits of each other, which turned out to be hilarious. Some of them, they were not Picassos. I don't know what they were, but God love them. They had a lot of fun, right? And then we had a lovely Valentine's Day dinner specials along with a dessert for two. It was wonderful. It was a cute little chocolate heart cake with whipped cream and strawberries. It was delish. But yeah, so things have been kind of hectic. So Dave decided to, for Valentine's Day, make one of my dreams come true. And I got to go see Dave Chappelle in St. Paul. And I was about 25 yards from the stage. And it was amazing. As you can see, I'm wearing my Chappelle sweatshirt that I got from the show. He has to be one of my favorite comedians of all time. He's kind of like our modern day Richard Pryor. He just says it like it is. And it's, I don't understand the hatred towards him because in all honesty, he's just speaking the truth and speaking of, saying the stuff we all think, right? But comedy is kind of that last bastion of free speech that we're going to have to hold on to that. Otherwise, if we don't have comedy, what's the point, right? Comedy is one of my passions. I love it. And he does it so well. And the the featuring comedians that he had come out before he performed, they were fantastic too. I mean, it's great to see new comedians coming up that get it, that get what stand up is all about. And kudos to them. Kudos to Dave Chappelle. Minneapolis really needed you. St. Paul really needed you. Minnesota really needed you to come here. And we appreciate you coming here and letting us know as Minnesotans that you hear us. And because you have such a huge platform and a voice out there that we appreciate you hearing us. And so thank you so much for a wonderful show. And they had this hip hop group called Clips. Never heard of them before. So on the way to St. Paul, I started listening to them, and wow, if you like old school hip hop like me, I grew up in the 80s, 90s and stuff like that. I mean, talk about a throwback group. They have like that NWA vibe with an East Coast flavor. And it's just two guys, and it was just so fantastic. I mean, like, I felt like I was in high school again. It was awesome. So I 10 out of 10 stars for the Dave Chappelle show. Unstoppable. If he's coming to a town near you, please go check him out, buy tickets. You need to see Dave Chappelle live. It's amazing. It's a religious experience for me. I'm not going to lie. So but yeah, so I literally got back from St. Paul today. And so as you can see, I look kind of, I've been traveling and it's just been on the go. I haven't even had a chance to put on makeup today. So you're just getting a wayward Winnie with this episode. But I think this episode is important, especially what's happening today in society and what Dave Chappelle talks about. And when Dave Chappelle was here, he also went and visited the memorial for Alex Preddy, who passed away January 27th due to, he was murdered. I wouldn't say passed away, during the protests and things going on with ICE. And, and looking at the building of all this hate towards each other, and you're not like me, so I must not like you. I hate you. I don't understand you. I fear you. I mean, we've been dealing with this kind of stuff for a long time, but you think it's 2026. Why are we still dealing with racism? Why are we still dealing with anti-Semitism? Why are we still dealing with all these prejudices? And, it's so cyclical, and you see this happen time and time again, but it's like, I don't know if history is not being taught the way it should, because, I think it should. We shouldn't whitewash history. We shouldn't take anything out of history, because if we don't know what's happened in our past, how are we going to learn not to do it in our future? And I remember going through school and learning about Black history and slavery, and during the Civil War and during the Civil Rights Movement. And not once did I ever hear the story of Emmett Till. Well, what makes Emmett Till so important? There were a lot of Black people that were lynched and murdered during the Civil Rights Movement, prior to the act being signed. But we are going to go back to 1955. Yeah, this is way before, this huge civil rights movement even started. In fact, this was kind of the catalyst that started the civil rights movement. Now, you would think that would be important to teach in schools, but they don't. So if you've never heard of the story of Emmett Till, thank you for joining me. I hope you stick around and learn about this piece of history, and to understand that this is the same kind of crap that we're still dealing with today. It just may have a different name to it, a different entity involved, but nonetheless, it's still racism and injustices that are happening to the American people. So let's go back to 1955. Now, in the summer of 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Lewis Till, known to everyone who loved him as Bobo, boarded a train leaving Chicago, heading south toward Mississippi. He wasn't traveling toward history. He was traveling towards family. Now, Chicago was loud and alive, brick buildings stacked high against the sky, streetcars rattling past storefronts, kids playing stickball in the alleyways. And Bobo thrived there. He was playful, he was mischievous in a harmless way. You know how boys are. And they just make adults shake their heads but smile anyway. He loved telling jokes, sometimes corny, sometimes bold. He loved baseball, loved hanging around with his friends, loved teasing his cousins just enough to make them laugh. Now, he had survived polio as a child, and though he wore a brace on his leg for a time, it never slowed his spirit. He sometimes stuttered, especially when he got excited, and his mother had taught him a trick to push through it. Whistle softly before speaking. It helped him catch his breath. It helped him find his voice. That whistle would later be twisted into something else entirely. Now, to Mamie Till Mobley, he was her only child, her pride, her world. She had raised him with structure, discipline, and insistence that he carry himself with dignity. She taught him to look people in the eye, to speak clearly, to believe he belonged in any room he walked in. Now, in Chicago, that confidence didn't feel like a risk. But in Mississippi, it was different. Now, when Bobo packed for that trip to visit his great uncle in Money, Mississippi, it felt like an adventure to him. A summer heat, country roads, cousins he hadn't seen in years. Stories about the South had floated through his family conversations, cotton fields, long dirt roads, the Delta sky stretching endlessly overhead. To a teenage boy, it sounded like freedom. But Mamie knew better. She had grown up in the South before moving north during the Great Migration. She understood the invisible rules, the ones that were never written down but enforced with violence. She sat her son down before he left. This wasn't about fear. It was about survival. Now, can you imagine sending your child on a vacation and have to go over these rules so they don't get murdered or beat up? I mean, why would... I understand how important family is, but I don't know if I could put my son in that situation. God bless Mamie Till Mobley, but I can't imagine what her heart was going through knowing what could happen to her son visiting Mississippi. Now, she told him, be careful how you speak, be careful how you look at people, don't argue, don't challenge anybody, and especially not with a white woman. Now, in Chicago, a smile was just a smile. A joke was just a joke. But in Mississippi, in 1955, the smallest perceived slight could become deadly. A black boy stepping outside the narrow expectations of Jim Crow could be accused of disrespect or even worse. Now, Bobo listened, he nodded, but he was also 14 years old. 14-year-olds believe in their own invincibility. They believe the world will bend the way it does at home. He had grown up in a city where he could move with a little more ease, where segregation was still existed but didn't suffocate in the same way as the Deep South. Now, Mamie watched him leave, likely with the quiet tension only mothers understand. Pride and worry braided together. She had no way of knowing that the train pulling away from Chicago would carry her son into one of the most consequential tragedies in American history. To the world, he would become a symbol. But in that moment, he was just Bobo, a kid going south for the summer, a mother trusting that he would come home. Now, it was August 24th, 1955. The Mississippi heat hung heavy in the air, thick and unmoving. Cicadas buzzed in the distance. Dust clung to skin and clothing. For a group of teenage boys, the evening felt ordinary. Just another stop at Brian's Grocery and Meat Market, a small country store that served the black community in Money, Mississippi. They had been picking cotton earlier that day, laughing, competing, talking big the way teenage boys do. Emmett, city bred, animated and full of stories about Chicago, had been the center of the attention. He had talked about integrated schools, about white classmates, about friendships that to his cousins sounded almost unbelievable. To boys raised under the rigid rules of the Delta, his life seemed bold, distant, and almost impossible. And maybe there was a little showing off. But inside the store stood Carolyn Bryant, a white woman in her early 20s working behind the counter. Now, in the Jim Crow South, the racial hierarchy was not just social, it was sacred in the eyes of those who enforced it. White womanhood sat at the top of that fragile, violent mythology. Black male behavior was scrutinized through suspicion and fear, no matter how young the boy was. Now, what exactly happened in those brief moments inside that store had been debated for decades. Some accounts say Emmett whistled, others say he said something playful, like bye baby, perhaps, or kind of harmless bravado of a 14-year-old might toss out without thinking. Some say he just simply smiled. But here's what matters. In Chicago, those gestures would have evaporated into nothing. A sound lost in the city noise. A teenager being a teenager. But in Money, Mississippi, in 1955, it was interpreted as a challenge. An invisible line, one Mamie had warned him about, was believed to have been crossed. Now, outside the stores, his cousins panicked. They knew instantly what Emmett did, not fully grasp what happened. They urged him to leave, to get in the car, to get away. The air shifted, and what had been a playful bravado curdled into fear. Like, can you imagine just being a teenager and trying to keep your cousin from out of town, like trying to tell him the rules and him not understand? Like, of course he's not going to understand. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical to know that if you were to say something to a white woman that could get you killed, that seems like it's unreasonable and illogical, right? Well, not in Money, Mississippi, apparently, in 1955.
Can you feel it? The shift in the air, the longer days, the promise of something new. Spring isn't just a season, it's a reminder that growth is always possible, and maybe this is your time to bloom. At Love and Lotus Tarot with Wendy Schrader, she can help you clear the energy of the past and step confidently into what's next. Whether you're navigating love, questioning your path, or simply searching for clarity, the cards offer insight, direction, and empowerment. This is your season of renewal, your season of healing, your season of stepping into alignment. Let's uncover the answers waiting for you and plant the seeds for the life you truly deserve. So book your reading today with Love and Lotus Tarot, and let's welcome the new beginning together. Visit lovelotustarot.com. Again, that is lovelotustarot.com, and book your session today.
Because in the Delta, accusations, especially those involving white women, did not require proof. They required only outrage, and outrage could be manufactured. But it activated generations of racist mythology. It tapped into a system built on terror where Black boys were not seen as children, but as threats. And somewhere miles away, Mamie warned echoed in hindsight. The South is not Chicago. What Emmett may have thought was a whistle to steady a stutter, what may have been a nervous habit or a flash of teenage confidence, was about to be weaponized against him. It was a small moment, but in Mississippi, small moments could turn fatal. Now, it was just after 2 a.m. in the morning, August 28, 1955. The Mississippi Delta was quiet in that way only rural darkness can be. No city noise, no traffic hum, just the distant hum of insects and the heavy stillness of the late summer air pressing against the small wooden house where Emmett slept. Inside, the family had settled in for the night. It had been an ordinary evening, stories, laughter, the comfort of relatives gathered under one roof. Emmett was sharing his bed with his cousins, likely exhausted from the long, hot days in the cotton fields. Then came a knock. Not gentle, not uncertain, a hard pounding against the door. Moses Wright, Emmett's great uncle, rose from his bed. There's a particular dread that comes with a knock like that in the middle of the night, especially in Mississippi. He knew before the door opened that this would not be good. Standing outside were two white men, Rory Bryant, Carolyn Bryant's husband, and J.W. Millam. One held a pistol, the other a flashlight cutting sharp beams into the dark interior of the house. They weren't asking questions. They were there with purpose. They demanded to see the boy from Chicago. 14-year-old Emmett was shaken awake. Imagine that moment. You're a child. You're half asleep. You hear strange noises. You see a gun. I mean, my goodness, you don't fully understand what you've done. Only that grown men are angry and they want you out of the house to go with them in the middle of the night. That's like a horror, like a nightmare. His cousins later remembered the tension in the room, the adults trying to reason, trying to de-escalate. Emmett's aunt pleaded, offering money, begging him to leave him alone, explaining that he was just a boy. But the men had already decided. This was not about clarification. This was about control. They ordered Emmett to get dressed. Think about that detail. He had to put on his clothes, likely with trembling hands, in front of men who had come armed in the middle of the night, his family watching, powerless, the house thick with fear, so heavy it must have felt hard to even breathe. Moses Wright would later testify that Emmett tried to reassure him, and then he said, "It's all right," or something close to it. 14-year-olds try to be brave in moments like that. They believe adults can fix things. Outside, the night swallowed them. They pushed into the truck and drove off into the Delta darkness. No arrest warrant, no police, no legal authority. Just two men enforcing an unwritten code with a gun. Inside the house, the family stood frozen long after the truck's headlights disappeared. They knew the rules of the world. They knew what could happen when white men came in the night. And still, even then, there may have been some hope. Maybe they would just scare him. Maybe they would just beat him. Maybe they would let him go. But in Mississippi in 1955 had a long history of night rides that did not end with mercy. That was the last time Emmett Till's family saw him alive. The silence that followed the truck down the dirt road would echo far beyond the small house. It would stretch across the state lines, across decades, across a nation forced finally to confront what had long been hidden in the dark. And that is racism. Now, Emmett Till's body was discovered August 31st, 1955, 3 days after he was abducted in the early morning hours of August 28th. It was found in the Tallahatchie River near Money, Mississippi, by two local boys who were fishing. His body had been weighed down with heavy cotton gin fans tied around his neck with barbed wire. The condition of his body showed the extreme violence he endured. He was identified by the ring he was wearing, a ring that had belonged to his father. For 3 days between the knock at the door and the moment the river gave him back. It's heartbreaking to know that people felt entitled that this was okay just because of the color of their skin. To wipe a 14-year-old child out just because he may have whistled, smiled, that is so outrageous to even imagine happening. And yet we see this kind of stuff in the news today. It's maddening, isn't it? Now, when Emmett's body was returned to Chicago, it arrived in a pine box, sealed. Authorities in Mississippi had wanted it to bury him quickly and quietly and out of sight, but Mamie Till Mobley refused. When she saw her son's body, the violence was undeniable. His face was so disfigured beyond recognition, one eye nearly destroyed, his features beaten and broken. The child she raised, the boy who laughed too loud and teased his cousins, has been reduced to evidence of hatred. Now, most mothers would have closed the lid and just buried the hatred and have it heal over time. But Mamie opened it. She made the decision that required the kind of courage most people will never have to summon. She insisted on an open casket, no cosmetic restoration, no soft lighting to hide the truth. Let the world see what I've seen, she said. Let them see what they did to my boy. She understood something in that moment, that it was no longer about her private grief. This was about exposure, about pulling back the curtain on a system that depended on silence. If America was going to look away, it would have to do so while staring directly at what racial terror looked like. For 4 days in September 1955, people lined up outside of Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ in Chicago. They came in waves: mothers, fathers, children, workers still in their uniforms, ministers in their dark suits. Some estimate says that there were more than 50,000 people who passed by his casket. Many wept openly. Some fainted. Others stood frozen. Black newspapers and magazines made the unprecedented decision to publish photographs of Emmett's body. Jet magazine printed the image. The Chicago Defender ran it, and those photographs traveled, folded into purses, passed hand to hand, studied at kitchen tables. America could no longer pretend. The image of that 14-year-old boy became a reckoning. For some, it ignited grief so deep it felt paralyzing. For others, it sparked something else, an anger, a refusal to accept that this was simply the way things were. Young people who could later become leaders in civil rights movements would point back to those photographs as a turning point. They saw themselves in his face. They saw their brothers, their sons. But when the trial began in the summer of Mississippi, hope for justice entered a courtroom built to deny it. Bryant and Millam sat calmly, confident. The proceedings unfolded before an all-white, all-male jury in a county where Black citizens were systematically excluded from jury service. Black witnesses testified despite threats and intimidation. Emmett's great-uncle Moses Wright did something extraordinary. He stood, pointed directly at the man who had taken Emmett from his home and identified them in open court in Mississippi. In 1955, that act was known as defiance. Now, when Carolyn took the stand, she had asserted that Till had grabbed her and verbally threatened her. She said that while she was unable to utter the unprintable word he had used, as one of the defense lawyers put it, he said he had done something with white women before. Then she added, "I was just scared to death." Now, the jury deliberated for just over an hour. Some later said that they would have returned sooner, but they stopped to get a soda pop. Of course, the verdict, not guilty. The verdict was delivered with cold efficiency of a system protecting itself. No hesitation, no visible doubt. Now, Bryant and Millam walked free. And because of those double jeopardy protections, they could not be tried again. Months later, they sold their story to Look magazine for money, confessing in chilling detail to the kidnapping and murder. They knew that they were untouchable. The law had spoken, but the nation was listening. 4 months after the trial, now Bryant and Millam admitted their guilt in Look magazine article. The magazine reported they paid them like $4,000 for their confessions, in which they graphically detailed their abduction of Emmett Till from his uncle's home, admitting that they pistol whipped him, forced him to disrobe, tied a heavy cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire, shot him, and dumped his body in the Tallahatchie River. Now, this is where this really gets my goat. Carolyn Bryant never spoke publicly about this incident, but a Duke University senior research scholar, Timothy Tyson, said she told him in 2007, at the age of 72, that she had lied about Till making any verbal or physical advances on her. In his book, The Blood of Emmett Till, Tyson writes that she had told him nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him. So his death was predicated that she made this whole thing up and told her husband, and her husband went after Emmett and killed him. There's special place in hell for people like that. Now, Mamie Till Mobley would spend the rest of her life speaking about her son, not allowing him to be reduced to a photograph or a headline. She turned her grief into activism, into education, into witness. The open casket did what the courtroom would not. It told the truth, and that truth refused to stay buried. Now, Emmett's name did not disappear into the archives or forgotten tragedies. It echoed in the living rooms, in church basements, in barbershops, in classrooms. That face his mother refused to hide became a mirror held up to America's conscience. You could not look at it and claim ignorance. You could not study it and pretend neutrality. Bobo, the playful teenager from Chicago, became something much larger than himself. His death became just months before a seamstress in Montgomery refused to surrender her seat on a city bus. When Rosa Parks later reflected on her decision, she spoke about Emmett Till. She thought of him when she chose not to move. His name traveled with her onto that bus. It traveled into the Montgomery bus boycott. It traveled into the mass meetings, into the sermons, into rising voices of generations unwilling to bow any longer. Young activists would say they saw themselves in him. If it could happen to Emmett, it could happen to any of them. His murder exposed the lie that separate but equal was simply an unfortunate inconvenience. It was revealed the violence underpinning it. And as the civil rights movement surged forward, through sit-ins at lunch counters, freedom rides through hostile towns, marches across the bridges stained with tear gas and blood, Emmett Till's story hovers in the background like a drumbeat. Not forgotten, not resolved, and not forgiven. His name was invoked in speeches, written on protest signs, carried in the memory by those who demand voting rights, desegregation, and dignity. He became a symbol not because he chose to be, but because the injustice was so stark and so undeniable that it had cracked something open in the national psyche. And the decades that followed did not allow his story to rest. Markers were erected in Mississippi, some vandalized, shot at, defaced, a reminder that every memory can be contested ground. Museums and memorials rose to preserve the truth. Educators taught his story so it could not be softened by time. His mother dedicated her life to ensuring her son would be remembered not only as a victim, but as a boy, a vibrant, loved human. Then in 2022, nearly 70 years after his murder, Congress passed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, finally making lynching a federal hate crime. Talk about long overdue. It took till 2022 to get an anti-lynching act enacted as a hate crime. For generations, anti-lynching legislation had been proposed and blocked. Blocked? What the? Again and again, the federal government had failed to name racial terror for what it was. And when the bill was finally signed, it carried Emmett's name. A solemn acknowledgement that justice delayed is not justice delivered, but a recognition it still matters. Well, at least it matters, but my God, that long? It took that long. Yet no law can rewind 1955. No act of Congress can return a mother's child. No memorial can fully contain the weight of what was lost. Because at the center of all this, the marches, the legislation, the history books, was just a 14-year-old boy, a boy who packed a suitcase for the summer, who teased his cousins, and who had a stutter and a whistle and a smile. Emmett was not born a symbol, but he was made into one by brutality. His story remains a wound in America's narrative, tender, unresolved. It's warning about what happens when racism is normalized, when myths are weaponized, and when justice serves power instead of truth. Now, when you want to compare this to what is happening now that we're dealing with, I mean, history does not live in black and white photographs. It breathes, it lingers, and we should learn from those things, right? It waits to see whether, are we even paying attention? I mean, a lot of the stuff that's happening now, it's like, we read about this stuff in the history books. Hello. I wanted to tell this story because of Black History Month. Not to reopen wounds, but to refuse amnesia. Why are we repeating these same patterns decade after decade? Aren't we learning anything from our past? Because hatred does not just disappear on its own. It evolves, and something has to feed it. It changes language. It hides behind politics, behind online anonymity, we got those keyboard warriors. And to have this division that feels easier than just trying to understand the other person. Today, we see those racial slurs being hurled in comment sections. We still see communities divided by fear. We still see people reduced to stereotypes instead of being seen as just human beings. The details may look different, but the root, dehumanization, is the same. Now, Emmett Till's murder was fueled by a lie, amplified by pride, and protected by a system that valued white supremacy over justice. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? That formula is not ancient. It's a warning label that we've seen time and time again. When we allow misinformation to spread unchecked, and when we excuse cruelty because it benefits our side, when we stay silent because speaking up feels uncomfortable, we inch closer to repeating what we claim to condemn. I mean, it's just, if we're going to stay silent, we're just going to repeat 1955 all over again, just in a different way and with a different, culture or skin tone. I mean, history teaches us that silence protects the powerful. Courage protects the vulnerable. So I wish, I wish people would be more like Mayhem Till Mobley. She chose courage. She chose to make a nation that was forced to look at what they allowed to happen to Emmett. Because in Mississippi, this was the norm within the United States. They refused to say this is just the way it is down here. No more. It wasn't going to happen anymore. So the question I have for you guys is, when you see hatred, do you just scroll past it? When you hear prejudice, do we just laugh it off? Or when injustice surfaces, do we convince ourselves it's not our fight, or should we get involved? Or do we remember the 14-year-old boy, Bobo, Emmett, and decide that indifference is not an option?
Hello, Darklings and my fellow mind travelers. This is Mark Allen Lanou, the Gemini Mind. Come take a journey with me through this place we call life by picking up a copy of my book, Reality Was Once the Tapestry of the Dreamer, available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon online. You can find the links also on my website, markallenlanou.com. Chock full of stories about organized crime, the paranormal, my music career, NASA, and more. So go pick up your copy, and you all rock. Indeed.
Learning about history means more than just memorizing dates, places, people, things like that. It means recognizing patterns, which you interpret the cruelty before it calcifies into policy. It means teaching our children empathy instead of suspicion. It means understanding that justice is not automatic. It is chosen, defended, and demanded. We need to honor these type of cases in our past to look at the ugly truth and say, this is what was going on, and you guys allowed it to happen. Because honoring Emmett Till it's not about just staying in the grief of his death. It's about choosing something better, to be better than what we were in 1955. Now, watching the news, are we better? In my opinion, no, we're actually worse. You would think that by now we would not even be talking about racism as a current event. The only thing you would be talking about is in past tense. And it's important to make sure that no one ever again has to become a symbol because we failed to confront the hatred when we first saw it. So those are kind of my 2 cents when it comes to that. But Emmett Till was just a boy living the life that he was meant to, and someone decided to play God and take him out. And then they got to go scot-free. And then later admit that they did it, and still nothing came about it. And to know that it took 70 years for an anti-lynching act to be put in place to say that if you were that it put it in the category class of a hate crime. Well, obviously, isn't every crime kind of hate anyway? Especially lynching? I mean, I don't know, but I honor maybe Till Mobley. I honor the Till family. I honor Emmett Till because of his case gives us a standing point to say we do not want to go back to that. Unfortunately, he had to lose his life because of it. But for Black History Month, I would like to honor Emmett Till because of everything that's been going on, especially here in Minnesota. But he's the case that we need to look at and say we cannot let it get to this anymore. And we got to figure out what to do to not get there. So, you know what? And encourage yourself. Look up some Black history that you may not know. And I've said this on my show in the past, but I'm going to say it because I probably have a lot of new listeners, which I'm very happy that you guys are joining me. Did you know that the first Black millionaire was a woman? And no, it's not Oprah. It's not Oprah. Although she is filthy rich. No, it was Madam C.J. Walker. She was born in 1867, so just after the Civil War ended. Black slaves were emancipated, but she was the first African American to become a self-made millionaire in the United States, building a fortune. At the time, it was a 600 to 700 million or 700,000, which today's money is about 8.9 to 10.4 million. And she created hair care products for Black women. She was born to former slaves. She developed the Madam Walker's wonderful hair grower and trained thousands of agents, leaving an agency of Black entrepreneurship and philanthropy. I mean, did anybody know about that? They didn't teach me that in school. I had to look it up on my own. So, if you feel like you don't have an understanding of certain people's culture and history, take the time to look it up. Don't just assume. Don't just go on social media or ChatGPT just to say, okay, give me a brief history on this. Or no, really get yourself involved and look at the patterns that have gone throughout history and where we are today, and see the direction that if we continue down this road, we're going to end up right back where we're saying, God save the king. So all I'm saying is that God bless America, and God bless Emmett Till and the Till family, and to history and to Black History Month. We have to figure something out. And I encourage, especially young people, to take the time. Don't listen to a 15-second TikTok, please. So with that being said, that's all for today. I do have, there's a lot going on at the Palmer House. We have Jody Dean's event coming up, who's featuring Dustin Perry. But come on down to the Palmer House. We have live music. We have historic tours. You can go to the palmerhousehotel.com. You click on the events calendar. It shows you all the events, where you can get tickets for the tours, any other type of events we have going on. Sometimes we have these pop-up events where we have painting parties, or, we've even been talking about having cribbage tournaments here. I don't know how to play cribbage, but I kind of want to learn. And here's my chance. Yeah, come on down to the Palmer House. And hey, if you, like I said, if you want to stay here Friday and Saturday night, and you can get that extra night a day ahead of time off of work, you can get Thursday night free. Yes, I said free. Who doesn't love free? Right now we're open Wednesdays 5 to 9 for dinner, open Thursdays and Fridays 9 to 9, and then Saturdays 8 to 9, and Sundays 8 to 3. Breakfast is served all day at the Palmer House on Sundays as well. So come on down. You can visit the website again, or give us a call at 320-351-9100. You can book a room. Or if you want to just reserve dinner parties, give us a call. We'll accommodate you. But thank you guys so much for joining me this week. Hopefully things will calm down a little bit, and but there may be some weeks where I have to miss an episode from time to time because I am really busy, and the Palmer House is my baby, and I got to take care of her first and foremost. But I will do my best to try and get an episode out to you every week. But like I said, don't hate me if I skip a week or two here. I'm doing the best I can, and it's an adjustment for Dave and I. We did buy a hotel, a restaurant, and a bar. We got the trifecta we literally went to business school 101 from the School of Hard Knocks. That's basically what happened. So thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.